In the larger film community, director Paul Thomas Anderson is widely considered to be one of our finest living directors. While his output is relatively small compared to his peers, each one of his films is of such an impeccable caliber that his influence on the medium is undeniable. Affectionately called PTA by his fans, Anderson is held up by his contemporaries as a shining example of a true artist creating truly important work. Like his contemporaries Steven Soderbergh and Quentin Tarantino, he broke out as a professional director in the heady days of 90s independent film, catapulted into the limelight by a formidable debut at the Sundance Film Festival. Anderson's birth in June 1970 places him firmly within Generation X, whose film-inclined cohorts grew up under the dawning sun of home video, raised on an endless diet of easily accessible video cassettes. The first generation of filmmakers to cut their teeth using cheap video and not expensive film, they could afford to make mistakes, and they made plenty of them. As a precocious kid growing up along the outskirts of Los Angeles, Anderson caught the film bug as early as 8 years old, and by age 12 he was already shooting little home-baked productions on his father's Betamax camcorder. His father, Ernie Anderson, encouraged Paul's pursuits and provided him with a never-ending source of creative character fodder in the form of his eccentric showbiz friends. Back in Columbus, Ohio, Ernie had been a late-night disc jockey and beloved local icon by the name of Ghoulardi, a name that Paul would later appropriate for his own production company. And it was Ernie and his colorful set of hooligan friends working in the fringes of the entertainment industry that initially inspired Paul to forge a distinctive artistic voice for himself. By age 17, Anderson had grown confident enough in his abilities that he felt ready to tackle his first serious project. He recruited the talents of his father and his friends, and raised the necessary funding by taking on a job as a birdcage cleaner. The proliferation of cheap videotape in the 1980s also resulted in the explosion of easily accessible pornography, a genre that captivated Anderson not because of its titillating imagery, but because of its never-ending assortment of fascinating, sometimes sad characters. He aspired to make a film about John Holmes, the legendary pornographer with a legendarily large package, but stylistically, he was influenced by Rob Reiner's This Is Spinal Tap and its comedic documentary conceit.
Because they want me, not you, me. They don't want to see me mumble some cheap dialogue. They don't want plot. They don't want character. They want me, DIRK DIGGLER. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Because I'm a 100% government-inspected top choice star in this town. And the fact is, you're nothing without me.
All of these elements converge to form the DIRK DIGGLER story, a mockumentary about the eponymous John Holmes-inspired porn star with a large endowment rivaled only by an even larger ego.
You got the touch. You got the power.
Clocking in at 30 minutes, the short plays like an early blueprint for his breakout feature Boogie Nights by using the same basic plot progression and character archetypes he'd later flesh out in the full feature.
But I think that the vocals are a little, and I think that I know that we could speed it up a little bit.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, like a couple octaves.
You think the bass is taken away from the vocal?
No, not really. Maybe. It sounds balanced to me.
It's definitely taken away from my vocal. Just take the bass down and bring up the vocals. Okay, let's do it, Nick. You heard him.
5 days a week I do this. 12 hours a day under what I would graciously call abnormal condition.
Listen, Dirk, if I were 10 years younger and I didn't have that accident, I'd be right in the bed with her and I'd show you what a cock looks like.
Oh, spare me, Jack. I've been hearing that for 3 years, and I'm not going to hear it for 3 more, so put that line to rest.
Anderson's friend Michael Stein plays the role of DIRK DIGGLER, establishing the character as a combative, egotistical force of nature long before Mark Wahlberg got his hands on the part.
I'm not going to tell you again, Jack.
Reed, I like you pumping your arms. I think that's very important. Get those arms very big, because... But what we need is big is Mr. Torpedo area, the fun zone, all right? All right, let's work on that, okay?
Bob Ridgely, a close friend of Father Ernie, plays the role of director Jack Horner, the character which Burt Reynolds would later stake his career comeback on. Ridgely wrings a lot of emotion out of his performance, despite hiding his eyes behind giant black sunglasses.
Listen, I've seen you push 15 inches. You were lucky you've got 11 today. You'll be lucky if you've got that. Listen, I've seen you fumble your lines, you're forgetting things, you're completely nervous. Audiences are going to want more. They want more, Dirk.
Other core characters from Boogie Nights make their prototypical appearance here, like John C. Reilly's Reed Rothschild in the form of Eddie Delcor, and Rusty Schwimmer's Candy Kane, an early version of Julianne Moore's Amber Waves. Anderson's first work is admittedly lo-fi, filming on videotape partly out of necessity, but also because of the inherent video aesthetic of both the documentary and pornography genres. Anderson's penchant for constantly moving the camera is already evident in the Dirk Diggler story, seeing him utilize handheld camera moves that roam the space and adjust the composition on the fly, so as to establish a sense of immediacy and realism. The documentary footage is interspersed with staged still photographs and taped interviews with the characters, further riffing on the style of This Is Spinal Tap.
Dirk was the greatest actor I ever worked with. Not the greatest person, but, well, by far the greatest performer.
Several of Anderson's defining thematic conceits make their first appearance in the Dirk Diggler story, like a constantly moving camera and the presence of an omniscient narrator, who is voiced here by Father Ernie.
The world won't remember Stephen Samuel Adams, or his parents, or where he grew up, or his religious beliefs. To the rest of the world, this is the face of the world's greatest pornographic film star.
What's striking about the Dirk Diggler story is the presence of a palpable family dynamic amongst this group of pornographers. The family angle would later be played to a more substantial degree in Boogie Nights, but already we get the sense that Anderson has a genuine love for these characters, like they're a part of his own family. They depend on each other, they need each other, they are not complete without each other.
Dear God, we're trying so hard to make a hit out of this. We need all the help we can. We need help with the lights. We need help with the makeup. We need help with the acting. We need help within to make what we have even larger and better. So, dear Lord, I ask you, please, help us. Keep us from the great, great crime of premature ejaculation.
At a core level, Anderson's films are about people trying to find their place within a family unit, and those who actively turn away from the embrace of family are met with tragedies like accidental death, murder-suicide, or abandonment. As an early first draft of Boogie Nights, the Dirk Diggler story is already interesting on its own merits, but what makes it even more compelling is how confident Anderson's filmmaking voice already seems. Despite being shot on shoddy video, the film has a certain polish that places it above what 99% of aspiring pre-film school directors are capable of. There's not a lot of directors that most can say were born to be a filmmaker, but in the case of Anderson, it's a notion that's nearly impossible to deny.
Okay, everybody, let's just go. Let's just roll this one out, okay? Let's just do it. I lived through this. If I lived through this, I can do it again. All right. Action.
Are we on?
Yes.
We're on the set of the CBS movie Secret Vows. Now, everybody knows the actors and the directors, the flashy Hollywood side of making a movie. We all know that. But there's something that a lot of people don't realize, and that's the importance of good transportation. Jordan, are you filming me or are you filming?
Buddy, I just keep going. I've got you.
Okay. You look like you're framing my chest.
No, I'm not.
You got me?
Yeah.
Okay.
When it was time for Anderson to go to college, he naturally went the film school route, like so many other would-be directors before him. He was admitted to Boston's Emerson College as an English major, lasting for 2 semesters before he grew dissatisfied with his education there. Subsequently, he enrolled in NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, where he reportedly studied for all of 2 days before he decided that the institution of film school in general held no benefit for him. He arrived at the conclusion that the best way to attain a film education was not to sit through an endless series of seminars and workshops, but to simply go out and make a film. He scraped together funding with $10,000 that his father had squirreled away for college tuition, supplementing that with some gambling winnings and his girlfriend's credit card. After he secured the producing services of Wendy Weidman, he was able to score a camera package donated from Panavision, as well as a diner location out in the desert for a weekend of shooting. This one weekend soon ballooned into a much longer shoot, as production issues and on-the-job training caused no shortage of hiccups for the burgeoning young director.
Now I'm going to light this, and I'm going to wait for the coffee to be poured, because that is the correct order of business. Otherwise, this thing of urgency that you have to tell me, it's going to be like a conversation in 2 passing cars on a highway. That's why we have this coffee and these cigarettes. You understand? I'm talking about our bonfires for today.
Anderson's deep knowledge of film history and obscure character actors is already highly evident here. The piece is anchored by Philip Baker Hall, a venerated performer who has since become a key player in Anderson's repertory.
You can't get back yesterday, or the day before, or even this morning.
I know that. That's the whole thing. That's the whole point of this story.
His calm, collected delivery grounds the film and brings in unexpected gravitas. Getting Hall on board was something of a coup for Anderson, who approached him on the set of a CBS TV movie that the two were on together. Baker as an actor, Anderson as a lowly production assistant. Anderson gave Baker the script to the short, and Baker was generous enough to take a gamble on this unruly, untested young director. Anderson also recruited the help of Kirk Baltz, who had previously made a name for himself as the unfortunate cop Marvin Nash in Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs a year earlier.
I can't let this happen. I can't let my wife and friend be killed.
Additionally, Baltz acted as a producer and was instrumental in getting the film made. Scott Coffey and Miguel Ferrer round out the cast, with everyone turning in fine performances that help make Anderson's direction look not only competent, but confident. Over the course of his career, Anderson has made a name for himself thanks in part to his precise, classical approach to composition and camera movement. Unconcerned with modern, trendy techniques like shaky cam or rapid-fire editing, he takes his cues from the revered directors of yesteryear. Cigarettes and Coffee is the first evidence of this aesthetic, lensed by cinematographers Vincent Baldino and David Phillips. Shot on handsome color film, the short is assumingly a far cry from the washed-out analog video of the DIRK DIGGLER story, despite the fact that the only copy available for public consumption is sourced from a rather degraded VHS tape. The first thing to notice about Cigarette and Coffee's visual presentation is somewhat of an abstract, intangible thing, but there's a high degree of precision to Anderson's compositions here. Every shot is thoroughly considered, telling the most amount of story with minimal force. This is echoed in his camera work, which glides on dollies and Steadicam rigs fluidly and flawlessly. Like his peer Quentin Tarantino, Anderson uses punchy insert shots sparingly, using them as bold punctuation rather than detailed cutaways. Furthermore, there's a distinct California vibe here, despite the story itself being set in a generic desert locale. Having lived his entire life in the state, Anderson's work examines the nature and psychology of California more so than any other contemporary director. Almost all of his work is set in California, specifically the San Fernando Valley where he was born, and explores the weird and wonderful characters that inhabit it. This part of his style is better realized in his feature work, but Cigarettes and Coffee shares elements of California Kana in its dusty diner setting, beat-up muscle cars, and sunshade-wearing mystery men. It's fairly safe to say that the early period of Anderson's career was heavily influenced by director Robert Altman, who is well known for ensemble films like Shortcuts and Nashville that follow a variety of colorful characters instead of a traditional plot with a singular protagonist. While the characters of Cigarettes and Coffee initially seem very disconnected from each other inside of a sprawling narrative, Anderson pulls the various story threads tighter together to form a coherent mosaic centered around a singular theme or idea. In Cigarettes and Coffee, we have three separate sets of characters who, on their face, are completely uninvolved in each other's affairs. However, they are each united by a particular $20 bill that is passed between them. Possession of this bill brings different fortunes to different owners. Some lose everything, some gain only a little, and for some, it's simply a routine business transaction. Cigarettes and Coffee's selection into the 1993 Sundance Film Festival Shorts program could be credited as one of the most transformative events in Anderson's career. The film's warm reception by festival audiences earned him an invitation to the Sundance Institute's prestigious Directors Lab, the program that helped Anderson's peer Quentin Tarantino launch his first feature, Reservoir Dogs, only a year earlier. Like Tarantino, Anderson is one of Sundance's biggest success stories, with the ensuing growth of his artistic profile cementing the festival's reputation for discovering rising talent. In the labs, Anderson got a film education much more valuable than the one he sought and failed to find from Emerson or NYU. In Park City, Utah, he learned from the best and honed his skills while making helpful connections within the industry. He was approached by producer Robert Jones, who offered his assistance in expanding the short into a feature. Under Jones's mentorship, Anderson developed the short into a larger story that concerned itself with an aging gambler who will do anything to hide his dark past from a pair of close friends he's come to love as if they were his own children. Anderson grew to love the story as if it were his child, lovingly giving his film a human name, Sidney. His experience in actually making the film, however, would be anything but blissful.
I have the money to give you right now, in this moment. I will give you all that I have. Maybe before you were going to kill me, maybe. I don't know. I know John, and I love him like he was my own child. But I can tell you this, I don't want to die.
The film that Anderson began as Sidney exists now as Hard 8. Beloved with immense fervor by Anderson's cult of followers, but mostly overlooked by the mainstream film community. In a diner in the middle of the Nevada desert, an old man named Sidney offers a forlorn-looking young man a cigarette and a cup of coffee, unwittingly forging a long-lasting father-son bond that will eventually culminate in the revelation of Sidney's darkest secret. Cigarette and Coffee's Philip Baker Hall finally gets a chance to shine as the protagonist Sidney.
If I were to give you $50, what would you do with it?
I'd eat.
How long can you eat? How long can you live on $50?
I don't know.
I would bet not very long.
A paternal and patient soul who's seen a lot of hardship in his life. He's a helper of people, seemingly trying to atone for some great wrong he's done in his life.
Clementine, my darling Clementine, listen to me, will you? Are you listening? If you stay here, you will be caught. Okay? We're talking about kidnapping, extortion, other things, I don't know what. But not good things, honey.
Hall brings a great deal of class and respectability to the film, expanding upon his role from Anderson's short with an involved, nuanced performance.
Need a bucket. I need a bucket.
Known primarily in recent times for his gigs in Judd Apatow comedies, John C. Reilly turns in a rare dramatic performance as the anxious yet loyal John. Reilly plays the character like a cluelessly loyal dog, constantly depending on Sidney to bail him out when he inevitably stumbles into trouble.
Sid, don't leave, please.
John, I can't get involved.
Yeah, but you don't have to be involved. Just don't leave.
John, you've got a guy unconscious in there. A guy you kidnapped and are holding for ransom. Do you realize how fucking serious this is?
John is a lost young man, deeply in tune with his emotions but unable to properly express them.
I have to make money, you know? I have bills. I have an apartment that I have to pay for. I have a car. I have a Camaro. I mean, that costs money, you know? Every month I have to pay my bills, and if I don't, then my credit gets fucked up, and I can't have fucked up credit because then I'm fucked.
Gwyneth Paltrow is convincing as the cynical, disillusioned cocktail waitress and hooker Clementine, refusing to shy away from the inherent ugliness of her character's personality, even while serving as a feminine beacon of hope for Sidney and John. As the film's de facto villain, Jimmy, Samuel L. Jackson is dangerously slick and unpredictable.
Please don't point the gun.
I want the money now, you hear me?
No,
I want the money now.
Don't point the gun, Jimmy,
Call me a tough guy, huh? Huh?
Jesus
Well,
Christ,
I am
Jimmy.
a tough
What's
guy.
so many?
This gun in your
Don't.
face is real tough, ain't it?
The 90s were Jackson's heyday, seeing him turn in unforgettable performances for directors like Tarantino and Steven Spielberg. His acerbic charm is present all throughout Hard 8, providing yet another variation on that Jackson persona we all know and love. Over the years, actors like Hall and Reilly have become a core part of Anderson's repertoire of performers.
The way you look, I think you know what I'm saying, old-timer. I think you do. Jesus Christ, why don't you have some fun? Fun!
A few other cameos contained in Hard 8 illustrate the foundations of this repertoire, like the appearance of late Oscar-winning actor and regular Anderson collaborator Philip Seymour Hoffman as a cocky craps player, in addition to the DIRK DIGGLER story's Bob Ridgely turning up briefly as a schmoozing keno manager. Anderson's repertoire of collaborators isn't just limited to the talent. It extends to the skilled craftsmen he employs to help bring his stories to life. As his first feature, Hard 8 naturally sees his first time working with several of them. Robert Elswit serves as the cinematographer, shooting on Super 35mm film and helping to establish Anderson's formalistic aesthetic. The film is presented in the 2:35:1 aspect ratio, but for budgetary reasons it wasn't shot in anamorphic, despite Anderson's desire to do so. The visual presentation applies the same approach used in Cigarettes and Coffee, a classical, economical style of photography that's short on fuss and long on power.
I said I heard the story about Atlantic City.
What? Tough guy, huh? You can tell me what?
I haven't told John, but I know about Atlantic City.
The gaudy Reno setting and a low-key lighting scheme lends Hard 8 a loungy, neo-noir vibe. This is also reflected in Anderson's constantly moving camera, which favors precision and discipline. He mostly utilizes graceful dolly moves, using handheld cameras only sparingly to convey immediacy when needed. More notably, Anderson incorporates several Steadicam tracking shots that create a slick energy and sense of space. While he would later use the Steadicam to more striking effect in his later films, Anderson keeps its usage in Hard 8 relatively simple, following Sidney as he walks through the casino floor, or as he approaches the fateful motel room that will shake up his adopted family unit forever. Anderson also chooses to cover a lot of his close-ups in profile, which further conveys a sense of precision and thoroughness in his compositions. Hard 8 marks Anderson's first partnership with the musician John Bryan in a scoring capacity. Bryan collaborates with singer-songwriter Michael Penn to create a jazzy, cool cat sound that accurately reflects both Reno's particular eccentricities and Sidney's aged sophistication. The film also contains the first instance of a particular tonal bell cue, dark and relentlessly foreboding. It works so well that Anderson would use it again in his later work, unconsciously creating a musical bridge between his first few films.
Joe.
DIRK.
It's Christmas again. December is here. Hasn't it been a wonderful year?
Lastly, an Amy Mann song shows up in the end titles, a singer-songwriter who would go on to become a key influence and collaborator on Anderson's early work, most notably on Magnolia.
There's something I need to tell you. It's something you need to know. It's important. I need to tell you. I love you, John. I love you like you were my own son.
I love you too.
Of all the themes that Anderson continually explores throughout his career, the theme of the family unit is the most central to Hard 8. The characters have all adopted each other in some fashion, as they all seek the comfort of companionship in a cold world.
I'm not going to let anything happen to you.
Sidney and John share a father-son relationship, while John takes a very literal step of inducting Clementine into his family by marrying her. Sidney's unconditional love and uncompromising generosity towards his young charges is revealed to come from a terrible secret that threatens to undo their union. Thus the theme gives the film its stakes and driving force. The tone is very similar to Cigarettes and Coffee. Nonetheless, Anderson does a fantastic job expanding the scope and changing the focus of his story while creating a consistent tone. Any production has its share of difficulties and headaches, but it was in the editorial arena that Anderson learned his first true lesson in the corporate obstinance of the studio system. To begin with, he was faced with a difficult distributor in Reicher Entertainment, who wanted him to change the film's name from Sydney to Hard 8, out of a fear that people would think it was about the city in Australia. Anderson begrudgingly acquiesced to their demands, but they weren't about to stop there. Producer Robert Jones became a constant source of headache, refusing to give his blessing to Anderson's desire to place the credits at the end of the film instead of the beginning, despite the rest of the cast and crew reportedly being fine with it. When Jones and the studio balked at Anderson's 150-minute director's cut, the young auteur refused to make any cuts, and was subsequently fired. Reicher took the film away and recut it. Anderson's original vision was validated when his cut was accepted into the Cannes Film Festival's Uncertain Regard program. The finished film languished on the shelf for 2 years after Reicher suddenly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, went belly up. Given how much of a mess Anderson's post-production experience on Hard 8 was, it's something of a miracle that his debut turned out as assured and confident as it did. The initially dismissive attitude towards the film hasn't stopped the home video market from reclaiming Hard 8 as a lost treasure. Many agree that it's an underrated gem of a film, a worthy entry in the esteemed body of work that Anderson would go on to cultivate. While the final word on the film's legacy has yet to be written, Hard 8 definitely stands as the humble starting point for one of the most remarkable filmographies in contemporary cinema.